I joined Air Cadets when I was 13, so I spent 5 years in Air Cadets as a sort of preamble to joining the Air Force, which was huge. Lots of discipline learnt there, lots of understanding about people.
You served in both military and corporate world. Do you think there is any difference between the styles of leadership there that made you think, okay, I need to look into it? Then you wrote a book as well, right? Thinking Fast.
I think the biggest difference is the outcome you're trying to achieve and what happens if you get it wrong. Because I think as a leader leading a program or leading a company, what's the worst that's going to happen? But if you're leading missions where to get it wrong is hugely detrimental to loss of life, loss of territory, hugely impactful. But on the flip side, you also have a very different group of people. In the military, people are far better trained at what they're supposed to be doing. They're far more likely to be highly aligned, have clear purpose and understanding of their mission, and ergo,
so are the challenges differ from military and the corporate world? The challenges are similar?
I think the challenges from a people perspective are the same. As I said, I think they're easier in the military because of the high alignment, the high level of training. You hear a lot of people talking about, I need to change the culture, I need to change people's mindset. And those are things that you can't physically do. You can enable them, and you enable those through changing behaviors. If you don't continually develop your skills, the way you think, your professional ability and your personal abilities, then you're going to become stale. If you're making decisions, but you're not skilled in critical thinking, you're going to make weaker, poorer, lesser decisions. My first warrant officer that I had, Warrant Officer Ray Shockling, lovely old guy, took me under his wing real early, and they're trying to give you that fatherly advice. And he said, all you need to remember is as an officer in the military, as a leader, you are there for you.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Curiosulus Chronicles podcast. This is your host, Rohit Gautam. I don't know where 2024 gone, to be honest. It's gone too quick. And we had great leaders coming onto the podcast and sharing their wisdom, knowledge. And I hope 2025 will be even better for me, for the podcast, and every one of you. And massive gratitude for everyone who has listened, watched the episodes last year. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do so by clicking the subscribe button and pressing the bell icon so that you can get updates whenever we release a new episode. Today's episode, and the first one for 2025, we're going to start with the topic very close to me. It's called adaptive leadership. And we have a guest whose name is Marcus Dimbleby. He has been in transformational leadership for decades. And he has served Royal Air Force, and then he moved into the corporate world. I learned a lot from this session, and I hope you too. So without further ado, let's crack on with today's episode and welcome Marcus. Welcome Marcus, welcome to Curiosulus Chronicles podcast.
Rohit, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, sir.
Oh, thanks for joining. I know you're quite busy, but thanks for taking some time out for the audience, because today's topic is very, very important for me. I'm very passionate about this as well. So thanks once again for joining.
Always a pleasure.
So before we start, Marcus, I would like you to quickly please introduce yourself to the audience, where you are at the moment, what you're doing.
Yep, sure, absolutely. So Marcus Dimbleby, I'm the managing director at a company called Effective Direction, which is a boutique consultancy, and we focus on leadership and management training, team dynamics, team building, and critical thinking. Been in that for about 12 years now. Prior to that, I was in the military for 20 odd years in the Royal Air Force. And I'm coming to you live from Cyprus, where I emigrated out here about 2.5 years ago now.
Yeah, sunny Cyprus. I should say that.
Yeah,
it's quite
out the window. Beautiful blue skies.
Here is all as usual, English weather, like grey, muddy, cold.
One of the reasons why we left.
Yeah. Thanks once again. Yeah. So to start, Marcus, I would like to understand, in your perspective, in your view, what is the definition of adaptive leadership?
Definition of adaptive leadership. Oh, right. So what do I think adaptive leadership is? Obviously, it's the ability for a leader to be adaptive. And for me, and what we've created is a leadership framework that really emphasizes the ability that we all need today to respond effectively. And what is it we're responding to? If you look around the world today, we're responding to change, ambiguity, and complexity. right? So respond effectively to change, ambiguity, complexity with really what truly is the world that we're facing into. And if you do that, that's going to allow you to focus on probably four things normally. A, engaging your teams, right? The adaptiveness of a leader is it's not always on the leader to do this. They have to engage others to support them because it's beyond the capabilities of an individual. So engaging your teams is number one. By doing that, you're going to what we call leveraging diverse perspectives. So we need what we call diversity of thought, the wisdom of the crowd. So if you engage your people, engage your teams, you're going to get different viewpoints, different perspectives, because they've all got different lived experiences. That's going to lead then to start fostering what we call a culture of learning and innovation. Because if your people believe that they can learn, they can innovate, they can test and experiment, then they're going to get different diverse perspectives. They're going to continue engaging and understand the ambiguity and complexity they're facing. And then that's going to allow you all to address what is ultimately these emerging challenges every day, but not just challenges, it's the opportunities. And if you think back to COVID, a lot of people saw COVID coming and companies sort of battened down the hatches, right? And they thought, oh, there's all these threats out there, all these challenges. Yes, there were, but also there's always opportunity. You talk about in every crisis and there's opportunity, and it's those smart individuals, those smart companies who don't just surf out the threats and challenges, but they also see those opportunities and strike and make the most of them and almost surf out on top of the opportunity versus trying to avoid the tsunami of the challenge and the threats that are often out there. So that's my perspective of adaptive leadership. I call it chameleon-like, which means as a leader, and it's not being inauthentic. It's not being you're putting a mask on all the time, but it's meaning that you are able to change regarding the environment you're in. So that means how do you speak? How do you behave? And what type of leader? Because again, if you look, I've done some research on this, and there's all 10 different types of leadership out there. You know, servant leadership you might have heard of became popular. Autocratic leadership, and these are all great, but you can't be just one thing in today's complex world. You know, the nature of business, the nature of life, we have to change as humans and especially as leaders. So for me, the adaptive leader is the person who, like a chameleon, can understand their scenario, situation, surroundings, and therefore be adaptive to what's needed to be done for that scenario. And as I said, whether that's changing their tone of voice, whether that's changing the words they're using, whether that's changing their behaviors, their stance, all of these things have to be understood. And if you have that self-awareness and reflection as a leader, then you're more capable of being adaptive to the scenario, situation that you're facing.
Rightly said, I think, Marcus. So I'm thinking now, why this is important in today's day and age now?
Why is this important?
Yeah.
You know, from the course you attended with us recently, we live in what's called a VUCA world. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And where we're seeing problems arise, if you look at some of the data out there, stress levels are at the highest they've been. Suicide rates in executives are going up. And what's happening is people who've learned to behave a certain way in business as a leader manager, and we're talking 80s, 90s business school training, they've maintained that mindset. They've maintained that posture, that frame of leading, and it doesn't work in today's environment. Just as we're not doing program management anymore in the linear waterfall fashion, we're doing agile. We're being adaptive in the way we think, we plan, we experiment, because we have to do, given the nature of what we're facing. So the world we're now facing into requires not just new ways of working, but we require new ways of thinking, and with that comes new ways of leading.
So now I'm thinking, because you served in both military.
You're thinking.
I'm thinking, So you served in both military and corporate world, right? Do you think there is any difference between the styles of leadership there that made you think, okay, I need to look into? Then you wrote a book as well, right? Thinking Fast. Yeah. So, and you talk about adaptive leadership in there as well. So what do you think? Is there any difference there between those two styles?
The difference between leadership in the military and in the commercial world, without a doubt. I think the biggest difference is the outcome you're trying to achieve and what happens if you get it wrong. Because I think as a leader leading a program or leading a company, what's the worst that's going to happen? But if you're leading missions where to get it wrong is hugely detrimental to loss of life, loss of territory, hugely impactful. But on the flip side, you also have a very different group of people. In the military, people are far better trained at what they're supposed to be doing. They're far more likely to be highly aligned, have clear purpose and understanding of their mission, and ergo, they're going to be more effective in supporting the leader. So the followership element, which is a key element of leadership to understand, you've got people who are highly aligned and going in the right direction with you already. And like I say, they're then coming with the training they need, the clarity on mission and purpose. And also, you've got the camaraderie that comes in a group fighting for that purpose, because they know if they don't all align and stand with each other, then for it to go wrong goes horribly wrong. So I think that's one of the key things. And with that as well, and this has certainly evolved from what's called Ausgang's tactic, the day of the Prussians, modern parlance is mission command. So how do you as a senior officer, the general, cascade down the capability of decision-making, taking actions, all the way down to the man who's at the front line with his weapon? So that's called mission command. And practicing that devolved decision-making responsibility is hugely different. And we're seeing a lot of that, and we're training executives in the commercial world to do that. But with that comes an ability for those individuals to be able to challenge effectively. So a corporal in the military can call out a general and challenge when they're being briefed on the plan before they go and execute that, because they're trying to understand what's going to be happening. They're trying to understand what their position is and what they're able to do and not do. So you do get that open challenge forum, if you will, of capability where people are going to be having quality discourse, talking about the intent, what we call commander's intent or leadership intent. And what you tend to get is real clarity on why we're doing something, what it is I want you to do. But what you never get is the how. That's left to the individual who's going to go and execute. So they have full empowerment to create their plan, how they're going to execute that, as long as they're going to achieve the why and the what of the mission. So I think that's the big difference. What's similar is that we're all dealing with people. So whether you're the CEO of a bank, a startup, founder, or a general out on the battlefield, you're dealing with people. And inherently, we're all the same. We've all got the same problems. You've all got the same concerns. So it's how do you nurture those people to become capable followers, but also one of the big things is how do you grow future leaders as well?
So you mentioned it's in both ways, it's all about people, right? So are the challenges differ from military and the corporate world? The challenges are similar?
I think the challenges from a people perspective are the same. As I said, I think they're easier in the military because of the high alignment, the high level of training, and hopefully we'll discuss this more about the training later. But the high alignment, high level of training, and clarity on mission. Everybody who's in the military, everybody who's served, has got a real clear focus on what they're doing, why they're doing it. And even when that often gets muddied, if you will, in the fog of war, the people either side of you, what makes you do what you do. So you're always going to have that real focus on supporting each other, supporting the mission and trying to achieve the mission, which obviously you don't have that level of camaraderie and focus in the commercial world. But the challenges ultimately from a leadership perspective are the same regarding humans and people, always.
And I know we talk about a lot of this mission purpose in corporate world as well, right? And I can see why it works with probably what you just said is why it works with military, is because people are trained, right? People are there, they have full alignment to do that. And sometimes corporate world, they don't have full alignment to do that.
No, I know. Yeah. Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. So how can then basically leaders then, I believe then you need some kind of resilience and adaptability within the teams as well. I know we're talking about adaptive leadership, and as a role, I think is to make your teams, your organization adaptive as well.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
how can, in your view, how can leaders then cultivate that adaptability within the teams and organizations?
How can they cultivate? This comes down to what we call changing behaviors. You hear a lot of people talking about, I need to change the culture, I need to change people's mindset. And those are things that you can't physically do. You can enable them, and you enable those through changing behaviors. And the sort of the key 6 things that we focus on is, number 1, fostering a growth mindset. What does that mean? That means having your brain open to things that might change, open to different perspectives, open to pushing yourself further rather than that fixed mindset. And whether it's a adaptive mindset, agile mindset, call it what you want. But it's changing people's behaviors to think differently, which is going to allow them to be more adaptive in a scenario because their mindset is shifting to think about different perspectives and growth. To enable that, the second thing is creating a culture of psychological safety. So how do you enable, as we talked about challenge earlier, how do you enable people to speak up? How do you enable people to come to work, bring their ideas, bring their innovation without feeling they're going to get shut down? So that's called psychological safety. And there are very simple tools and techniques that can physically enable that instantly. And again, it's a behavioral change that over time, all of these things change people's perspectives. That changes mindset. And then that starts to shift the culture in the direction you want. Talked about it already. Emphasis on the purpose and alignment. If people are lacking purpose and they're not aligned with each other, with other departments, with the company goals, strategy, etc., then you're almost into the what's known as herding cats. People are all over the place. They're not sure what they're doing. They start to make up work. Worked in one organization. They had so much work going on. We did the analysis. 36% of the work wasn't aligned to anything. It was just good ideas, or in the absence of direction, they made stuff up. So emphasis on the purpose and alignment. Number 3. Fourth one, and this always gets me because it's so lacking, investment in continuous learning and development for your people. If you don't continually develop your skills, the way you think, your professional ability and your personal abilities, then you're going to become stale. Again, the world's changing constantly. Therefore, we have to change and adapt within that world to remain relevant. And that's one of the biggest things lacking. Looking at the engagement scores, when asked what people want, it's not more money. They want progress. They want development. They want the opportunities to grow. So that growth mindset, but also growth in your competency is number 4. For me, number 5 is this promotion of agility and experimentation. So it goes back to having that growth mindset. It goes back to gaining different perspectives. If you're promoting that belief that people can be agile in the adaptive way, right? We can flex, we can pivot, we can experiment. If we're not sure, and often in the world of complexity, there's no solution, you have to come up with different ideas. Therefore, we have to experiment, test and learn, see what works. If you enable your people to do that, that's going to allow them to be far more adaptive going forward and resilient. And then, and I touched on this with the mission command, is enable decision-making at all levels. This for me is crucial. And this is something that in the military does really well. But if all your decisions are being made at the top of the house, talk about phraseology, a bottleneck.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where's the bottleneck? At the top of the bottle.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have a bottleneck where all decisions have to be made here, then you're going to start to get stagnated behaviors down through your organization. And depending how many layers you've got, and if you have to wait for the next steerco to sit in 2 months' time to make a decision on X, then it's out of touch. It's out of date. It's completely irrelevant by the time you get there. And all that does is then create frustrations, I find, amongst your people who want to make a decision, who have the answers, but they're not allowed because of the process or the structure within the organization stops that from happening. So foster a growth mindset, create that culture of psychological safety, give people emphasis on purpose and alignment, spend the money on continuous learning and development. That's essential. Promote that ability for agility and experimentation. It's okay to fail. test and learn, and then cascade those decisions down to where they're most appropriate and people are empowered to make them.
Yeah. And I think personally, I feel the last one, get the information, where the people actually have the information, have the decision-making capacity there is very, very crucial, I think, and in my experience as well, working with different organizations is even as a developer, I knew what the solution looks like for some time. I didn't have autonomy to do it, right? So because the decisions were made at the higher end and they say, no, you can't do this, you have to do this, And I can see how people get frustrated with this. And another thing, another thing you mentioned regarding the change, we can't change anyone. We can't, right? You have to enable that environment. As a leader, you have to change all your own behavior so that people can understand, this is okay to speak here. It's okay to understand the challenges. It's okay to speak up and feel better about it rather than be in a non-psychological safe environment where, every time you say something, you've been pushed down. So thanks for sharing those points. Yeah.
And this is what you're saying there. You can't change people. And I get phone calls and talk to executives. Hey, Marcus, can you come in and change our culture? I'm like, does it have wheels and a handle and I can move it around? No. Oh, you're a funny guy. I'm like, you can't change culture. Just as I can't change your mindset.
Yeah.
But hopefully, as you've seen previously, you can change people's behaviors instantly. And that's what then creates the first domino that will change those other things.
Yes.
And the more people you do that with, you get the collective effect. So that's how you do this. And that's why really focusing on people's behaviors, which you first need to understand. And as a leader, that's imperative, because if you don't understand your people, you're just going to blindly blunder around as a leader, saying the wrong thing, making the wrong decisions, and not enabling those people to be as effective as they could be.
Yeah. No, great talk. Okay, I'm very excited for the next part, which is because it's about critical thinking. Right. So I know we did a quick workshop last week, I think it was.
Yes.
And critical thinking. And I think after doing that, I think it's very important for leaders to have that, critical thinking. And what do you think, what role does it play in leadership? And how can leaders sharpen this skill within themselves?
That's a great question. So what role does critical thinking play in leadership? If you think about what leadership truly is, in the business world, what are these individuals doing? It's about decision making. Yes, it's about making people do what you want them to do, and obviously they're going to get paid to do that, so they'll do that without question. But it's about making decisions. And fundamentally, that is the whole purpose of what we call applied critical thinking, is to allow you to make better decisions. That's it. Lots of stuff in between all of those two, the start and the end, but that's what it's all about. So if you're making decisions, but you're not skilled in critical thinking, you're going to make weaker, poorer, lesser decisions. Okay.
Yeah.
Second thing, problem solving. And poor decision making and poor problem solving are two of the things that are causing a lot of problems today. So if you're solving problems, and again, you're not applying the concepts of critical thinking, you're not bringing in diversity of thought, you're not bringing different perspectives, you're not enabling the depth of analysis that's needed, then again, you're not going to be an effective leader. If you have critical thinking, what else is it going to do? It's going to promote innovation. Innovation, while we're seeing so much of it going on from the AI and technology perspective, actual innovation of business and growth and opportunities within and the products that they have is almost being stifled because people aren't speaking up, because people aren't problem solving. They're doing what we call satisficing, which is going what the first solution that comes up that's good enough, they go with that. Yeah. But then 2 or 3 months down range, they find out that wasn't optimal and things start to go wrong. Another thing from a leadership perspective, which affects us all, and I've yet to meet anybody that doesn't, is you've got cognitive bias. And there are 200 biases out there affecting how we think, how we make decisions. So again, if you're not using the capability of critical thinking to understand the biases and then either to accelerate them or to mitigate them and understand what impact they're having on your decision making, then again, that's going to be a major blocker for you as a leader. There's nothing worse than a biased leader, and it stands out a mile. And it's the first thing people will tell you when they go, "Oh yeah, this is his favorite thing to do all the time." And then finally, again, the fifth thing for this for me, it's going to allow you to empower your teams. And we often talk to people who are in new positions and like, Marcus, my teams won't speak up. What's wrong with them? And these are good individuals who want to have challenge, but the teams before have never been either enabled to speak up, or I call them the abused children. I've gone into some teams and come back to speak to the boss. I said, I'm not sure how long you've been here, but whoever you replaced, those individuals are behaving like abused children. They won't speak up. They're cowering. So they clearly had a leader before who shut them down. There was no psychological safety, and they don't understand the word empowered and certainly won't speak up right now. So again, going back to what's it going to give you? Critical thinking as a leader. It's going to make better decisions. It's going to enhance your problem solving. It's going to promote innovation for you. It's going to mitigate all those biases that you're facing, even if you don't know it. And ultimately, it's going to empower your teams to do this and think critically as well. And when we go into organizations, I've yet to go in and teach one leader or the leadership critical thinking. We do it throughout the whole pyramid. There's level of critical thinking. So like the course you came on, 90 minutes, that goes to 2,000 people. Everyone in the organization just gets that blast of 90 minutes. So they get it. They understand, this is what the boss is talking about. And then you'll create a cadre of capable people with all the skills, the tools, the techniques, the facilitation. And then the leadership, the executive will also understand it. And therefore, none of this is a shock to anybody. It's, again, you're changing the behaviors of the whole organization to start thinking differently. And through that, you get all those benefits that we've just talked about.
Amazing. And I will definitely put a link in the description as well of your website and the course on applied critical thinking, because I really enjoyed the first session, and I hope more leaders can join and then do the next part.
There's no barrier now because it's going to be free.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah. So 2025, we're calling it the year of the great giveaway for us.
Right.
So
amazing.
We've got a few things that we're giving away, but what we're doing with the fundamentals class that you came on, we're making it free.
Yeah.
And if people want to, they can contribute a donation, and then that's going to go to a charity of choice that we're going to run each time we run it.
So brilliant.
It's just trying to give people the opportunity to engage in this stuff as much as we can. And if we can do some good doing that as well, then
that's a great course. That's a great effort. Thank you very much. Gratitude to you, Marcus. So now I want to talk about you as well a little bit. So looking back at your career, from military to corporate, you've done a lot of leadership roles there. So what were the pivotal moments which shaped your leadership philosophy?
Pivotal moments. Let me have a think. Started pretty early. I think I joined Air Cadets when I was 13. So I spent 5 years in Air Cadets as a sort of preamble to joining the Air Force, which was huge. Lots of discipline learned there, lots of understanding about people. And then before I joined the Air Force, I had a 6-month gap to wait for the paperwork. And I went to work at where my dad worked. My dad worked in a big car parts company, and he was one of the directors up in the offices, and they had a warehouse, and all the parts would come in, and we'd dismantle them all, put them in boxes and ship them around the world. So I just worked in the warehouse for 6 months. And I got down there, and obviously my name's quite unique, and people like saying, Dimbleby, are you Alan Dimbleby's son? One of the directors. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, oh, here we go. I'm going to get all the stick now because my dad's up in the office in a suit and tie. And they're like, oh, your dad's a really good lad. I'm like, okay, I know, he's my dad. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, oh, he's always coming down. He's one of the few directors that comes down to the warehouse and walks around and talks to us and sees what's going on and understand, if he's trying to sell this at the top end, you've got to understand what's going on at the bottom end and how it's coming in. And at lunchtime, you go to the restaurant and he'd be playing snooker with the guys. And to me, that was really, it was heartwarming to hear that, but I just saw that's leadership. That's somebody walking the shop floor. Toyota call it going to the Gemba, going to the workplace to see what's going on. So I took that on board. And I thought, great, my dad's doing that. Hopefully I've got the genetics. If not, I'm going to certainly try and do it. Then I joined the Air Force. obviously you start training from day one.
Mm.
My first warrant officer that I had, Warrant Officer Ray Shockling, lovely old guy, took me under his wing real early, and they're trying to give you that fatherly advice. And he said, all you need to remember is, as an officer in the military, as a leader, you are there for your people. They are looking to you for everything, guidance, direction, support. You've got their corner. So that stuck with me. And then I got to my first professional role after qualifying as a fighter controller. And my boss dragged me. I'd been there probably 3 months, doing my job, youngest guy in the squadron. And my boss called me in. I thought, here we go, I'm in trouble. And he said, do you know what you are? I said, no, sir. He said, you're a bit of a social gadfly. And I didn't even know what a gadfly was back in the day. There's no internet in this early 90s. And I thought it meant a social butterfly. And he said, no. And I've since known what it is, having studied Socrates. And he said, a social gadfly. And Socrates saw himself as a gadfly who would fly around and bite people, stirring them into thinking. It's like it's this irritant that people aren't thinking. And what it was in my job, I was running operations, delivering training and controlling airplanes. And I was asking lots of questions. And what had happened was some of the older guys had got a bit frustrated by me saying, why'd you do that? Can't we do this? We should look at this way. And they'd complain to the boss. So I thought, here we go. I'm going to get my wings clipped and told off. And my boss said, why are you doing that? And I said, well, first off, I thought I'm an officer. It's my duty to look to see how we can improve things, how we can make the environment better, how we can do the job better, to call things out if I don't agree with them, irrelevant of my rank or status or age. And he's like, good. I want you to carry on doing that. And every 2 weeks, we're going to get together and you're going to back brief me on what you've found in your proposals. And ultimately, that became an actual organizational shift. And we had a team that formed and did this by default. Huh? So that was something that I really took forward, saying, you have that ability, and we all do. You have that ability. And I think an accountability to speak up. When something's not right, if you're that bystander who sees something going on and doesn't speak, you're as guilty as the participant who's the perpetrator. You have to, what I call it is doing the right thing. If something's wrong, you have to speak up, you have to change it. So that's something I learned very quickly. And then as I got more senior and I was going into more leadership roles, again, a boss took me in, and all of these things have just been little short words of wisdom. And he said, always think 2 up. So wherever you're at in the hierarchy,
okay.
Always think, he said, don't think what I want, think what my boss wants. He said, and you don't have to do it or physically enable that. He said, but if you're thinking that way, when I come to you with an ask, you will go, he's asking me this because of the requirements of his boss above. It said, and ultimately you'll start to be able to preempt things and do things without me even asking, because you're already ahead of me if you're thinking like my boss. And I just found that so helpful. And even if, as I said, you can't physically do something, it's a real enabler to understanding people.
Right.
And therefore, when your troops and you're working with your people and you're allowing them to do things and they're empowered, if I walked into the ops room one day and said, everybody stop, do this now, nobody would go, but what? Hang on a minute. They'd just do it because they understood the pressures that were coming in elsewhere. And most of the time, 95% of the time, I'd let them get on with things. They were empowered. But if I ever walked in and said, everybody stop, and you switch from the servant leader into the autocratic leader, and so many leaders today are fearful of making those autocratic calls.
Yes,
ultimately,
100%.
that's what leadership is when it's required. You know, when the proverbial hits the fan, somebody has to take charge. So that was something for me, understanding, getting to the Gemba, going to see the people on the shop floor, understanding the process of your business, focusing on supporting your people as a leader, being that gadfly, being that person who calls things out, doesn't accept that awful phrase, well, we've always done it that way. To me, you ever say that to me, that's red rag to a bull. Yeah, because we know 9 out of 10 times that's just people being lazy or too comfortable. And then fourth one was think 2 up, trying to appreciate beyond just you and your boss, and try and get that bigger picture. That leads into the strategic thinking that we often see a lack of in organizations. So I would say they're my sort of four lessons I learned through my career. On the commercial side, it was learning that there's a distinct lack of leadership. Going into these big organizations and just seeing how little leadership actually exists. Where in the military, I was trained on every promotion you go on a leadership course. By the time I've left the military, you've had 18 months worth of actual leadership training. I talk to executives, and if they're lucky in their careers of 35 years, they've had 2 weeks. Because it always seems to be an afterthought. You get promoted to a leadership position because you're good at your job. It's that Peter principle of, hey, Rohit's a great salesman. Let's make him a leader in charge of a team of 20 salesmen.
Yeah. That's how.
That scares the hell out of most people, and most people aren't good at that. And then you don't get the training. And one of the things with adaptive leadership we train leadership at all levels. For me, leadership is a capability. It's not a person. So there's no reason why your brand new, recruits can't be taught leadership, because they can exhibit leadership at the level they're at. So by the time they do get up to become a director and expected to lead a group of people, it's not a foreign capability.
Yeah,
they've been nurtured and they've stepped up those rungs of the ladder to the top, where normally what you get, people thrown in at the top of these ladders, and they're awful. We had a client last year who called me up, said, "Can we have a conversation?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "We've just lost 6 of our best people." I'm like, "Okay, why?" He said, "We promoted them." And they promoted 12 of their top performers. This was a marketing company. Wow. So 12 of their top sellers, their pitchers, and dropped them in. And he said, "Can you do some exit interviews?" I said, "Sure, but I know why." He's like, "Why?" And I told him, I said, "These people aren't capable. But they're brilliant." I said, No. They're brilliant at doing their job. That doesn't make them a great leader and manager of a group of people. And the first guy I spoke to, he said, "Marcus, I was billing this much. I was delivering this to my clients. I was loving my life. They promoted me, gave me a 6 million budget to manage and the 13 direct reports." I'm like, "And?" He said, "My stress levels went through the roof. I felt I was failing. I wasn't doing my day job as good. I wasn't leading these people." And I said, "And what training did you get for all of that?" He says, "0. Go figure. It's just like taking people out of their natural habitat and dropping them somewhere else without giving them any support or training. And to me, that's the lesson I've learned from the leadership perspective in the commercial world is don't assume. And we did a really good, with the Scottish Electric, everybody points upwards when there's a problem. When I ask the shop floor, "Hey guys, what's the problem?" "Bloody leadership up there." You go up there, what do? Bloody workers. And always, it's a grey, isn't it? There's an issue. Yeah. And when you explain to the shop floor the state of the leadership and what they're facing, and lack of training and lack of understanding and lack of critical thinking, it's no surprise that these organizations are in often the mess and failing that they're in. And where you do see the success, it's those standout leaders who've got this. And sadly, most of them are self-taught. They've got a shelf full of books and they're reading up at the weekends and they're learning and developing themselves. But that should be provided by the organization. I mentioned it earlier, investment in continuous learning and development. And if you're not doing that, especially in your leaders, then why are you surprised when those leaders don't deliver as you'd expect them to downrange?
Totally agree, Marcus. Thanks for sharing that. And in my thinking as well, after doing that critical thinking course and other courses, and it kind of validated my own thinking that we just said. Like, it's very important to keep learning, and people at the leadership roles, they probably, sometimes we have to be a bit empathetical because they didn't have the training. They didn't know what leadership looks like, so yeah, it's I think this is why it's important for people to think, and like you said, have that applied critical thinking skills and learn about leadership rather than just go in there, "Yeah, I'm a leader because I manage people."
I got the title. Yeah. Yeah. And I think going back to the behavioral change, and again, I can throw this one in, something I learned. When I moved into banking, one of my bosses, he newly arrived, he blocked his diary out. Blanket for like the year.
Right.
And everyone's like, "Oh," it's like, no, that's my time. And he goes, and obviously he got himself to where he had by learning himself. He said, but I am no longer wasting my weekends when I've got kids, wasting my evenings when I'm with my wife and family, doing work stuff. He goes, if work wants me to be a leader or deliverer or whatever it is, that's going to happen in work time. So he booked out an hour every morning, right? And then he told everybody, all teams book a half day a week for professional development. And that's a behavioral change that happens instantly.
Yes.
Because there was no debate. There's no, no. You are to.
Yeah.
And within 6 months, the difference there's 200 people in that department. The difference in output in the organization, they were like being spotlighted by the rest of the business going, how are they, is there some magic going on there? And they're like, no, it's just that organization, that team within it was so focused on what it needed to develop as an individual, what it needed as a team, and the ability to do that from the permission from the leader, who he himself was demonstrating that behavior.
That's it, yeah.
So that's that perfect, it's always in it as a parent, do as I say, not as I do.
Yes.
No, do as I do.
Yeah.
I'm taking the time out of my day job. I'm not answering my phone and emails. I'm reading a book. I'm watching this. I've got somebody coaching me. I expect you all to do the same. And it's okay to do that. That was a green light. And once that happened, and that to me is that it's that, okay, what we're talking, what's the other type of leadership? Vulnerability. Show your vulnerability as a leadership. What a load of rubbish. Right? Nobody wants to see vulnerable leaders. Right? They want strong, human leaders, right? Not weak. Vulnerability equals weakness. What we're talking about is humility. Right? If you have humility as a leader, right, that's letting people see that, you understand, you appreciate what they're facing. I say, if you go to the shop floor and see people, you understand, you've got humility, and therefore you can A, comprehend what people are feeling, B, take action that's going to let them see what resonates with them too, that also lets them be humble. Because as you said, going on that training course with us, you go away and you have a little bit of humility to, you know what? I don't know all that stuff that I should. I don't critically think. I just think I do. We talked about how your brain does that. So if you can lead by example, and I think demonstrating that, and again, being autocratic with it, you are to do this. And people are like, it's a trap, because it's almost like you never hear that. But when you do see that in organizations, and the organizations where we work, where those are the type of leaders who get this and want that to happen, they're off to the races with their results and their outcomes.
Yeah. It's very crucial, that is, that is the key. And like you said, I think that you do the behaviors you want people to do it. So people can, follow you or learn from you. Like, it's okay. Like you said, right? It's a great word. It is okay to do that because our leaders are doing it. So it's okay to do that, right? So, yeah. And unfortunately, we are end of our conversation. But I wanted to ask you, how do you see the concept of leadership evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think, and we're seeing it now, I think it is going to go back to what it used to be in people focused. In this last sort of 20 years, we seem to have lost the sight of what people are, your human capital, and that's what drives the engine of your organization. We've got too wrapped up in tech and processes and numbers, and I think we are going to see a shift back into enabling humans, be more empathetic and humble as a leader, and then upskilling leaders in the people skills, bloody awful soft skills term that they use. There's hard skills, soft skills, people skills, cognitive skills. I think we're seeing a growth of those. And as we've seen, World Economic Forum, critical thinking, analytical thinking, creative thinking, these are all the top skills needed, and they all sit above AI and technology. So I think there's a recognition that that's coming down range. And with that, we're going to start seeing people become more engaged rather than disengaged that we're seeing now.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks very much. So my last question I ask most of my guests. So what advice would you give to emerging leaders who want to actually, thrive in this VUCA world, this complex world?
What advice would I give? self-awareness and reflection to begin with. Hold the mirror up and be brutally honest. When you look at yourself, there's lots of imposter syndrome out there. There's lots of people, what we used to call in the military, winging it, just getting away with it, but that doesn't work forever. And I think if you can have that real hard look at yourself in the mirror, appreciate yourself, understand yourself first. And this goes back to Socrates and Marcus Aurelius days, self-awareness and understanding. And if you can understand that and then reflect upon that, what's needed, and then you will see what is needed. And invariably the needs will be more people skills, EQ, emotional intelligence, empathy, the ability to problem solve effectively, the ability to engage and empower people. And ultimately all that sits under this umbrella of critical thinking. And drop that ego. I mean, how many leaders have we come across who know everything because they've got the ego, because the title gives you, as you said earlier, that title you have gives you that leadership role. Yeah. Doesn't make you a leader. So I think be humble, see where your ego is. We've all got one. Just don't let it overrule. And then see what it is you can do. And what's your brain telling you? As you say, as we talked on the course, do you have to override your brain and start actually critically thinking rather than taking those shortcuts and the biases that are impacting you going down range?
Yeah, I love that you said we all have that ego. Just accept it, right? Yeah. You have to overcome. Yeah,
I've got one. You've got one. We've all got one.
Everyone, we all got
how
one.
How big
exactly.
do we allow it to get, and how much dominance in our lives do we have?
Exactly. Yeah. So, how can then audience connect with you about your work? And then, like you said, this fundamental is now kind of you making it free as well.
With
donations. So, how can they connect with you? Yeah.
Go to our website, effectivedirection.com. Sign up to the newsletter there and you'll be informed. Follow me on LinkedIn, Marcus Dimbleby. I'm the only one. I've got one of those weird names that luckily aren't many out there. And obviously, follow me there and the stuff will be posted on our comments. But best way is effectivedirection.com and sign up to the newsletter. And you'll get all the links. I'll share the links with you to...
Please, yeah, I will add it. Yes, I will add it into the description. Brilliant. So thank you, Marcus. Thanks for coming on to this podcast and sharing your wisdom, knowledge. I learned a lot, and I'm sure audience as well. So once again, gratitude to you. Enjoy the sunny Cyprus, not like grey UK, but have a great evening and great week.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rohit. Pleasure joining you.
Thank you. Okay, audience, thank you very much for watching this episode. Stay safe, take care, and I will see you soon with the next episode. Take care. Bye for now.